안녕하세요, 여러분. Hi, everyone. I'm your teacher, Joy, and this is our fourth episode. Today, I brought up my old mic because I wanted to focus on my voice and the content rather than my appearance. Anyway, let's talk about the case markers today. You know, Korean has the subject marker 이가 and the object marker 을. Today, I want to cover two big things. First, the general usage of case markers. And second, cases where they aren't really acting as case markers, but are attached to words that aren't subjects or objects. In Korean grammar, there's a category of particles called 보조사, and the 는 we talked about in a previous episode belongs here. There's are others like 만 and 도. Honestly, I'm not a fan of the term 보조사. It's my native language, but the term feels way abstract. The Sino-Korean word 보조 is like a mix of help and support. And to be fair, I still don't feel like I fully grasped the meaning of the term. I've asserted in my master's thesis that 이가 has evolved, extending its role to function secondarily as an 보조사. Anyway, let's get into the main topic. First, a case is a grammatical term that describes the relationship a noun has with a verb in a sentence. If you have the sentence, I drank coffee, the verb drank has a specific grammatical relationship with the noun I and coffee. Linguistics uses these specific names so that even if you change the structure, like in the coffee is drunk by me, you can still logically reconstruct the scene as the same as I drank coffee. I'll skip the deeper grammatical definitions for now. So we have these terms, subject and object. You've learned that 이가 is subject marker and 을 is object marker, right? But once you get out into the real world, outside the textbooks, you realize it's not always used the way you learned, which is just absolute chaos for a foreign learner. I know, I'm a language learner too. I talked about omission in the second episode, so please check that out when you have time. Like I said there, case markers are usually only used when necessary. When is that? One case is when the entire sentence is judged to have high information value for the listener. Whether the sentence is long or short, if the focus is on the information, the primary goal is to grammatically express exactly who did what, when, where, and how. Like in news articles. For example, a headline like President Trump has died would be huge news. And if President Trump's death actually happened, it would be a massive global impact. When you think about things like that, you aren't just delivering the fact. There are many implications even without saying them out loud. Now listen to this conversation. A says, 야, 지금이 몇 시야? B says, 엄마, 나 30살이야. 그리고 내가 엄마한테 말을 했잖아. 민지 할아버지께서 돌아가셔서 내가 장례식장에 간다고. What do you think? Is 지금이 몇 시야 a simple, genuine question? Is there something hidden behind it? Actually, this isn't just a simple question out of curiosity. We don't know exactly what A meant, but listening to the whole conversation, it probably translates to you came home way too late at night. And notice how B emphasized every single sentence components with all the case markers attached. Depending on the situation, this might sound polite, but in this specific context, it feels like B is being sarcastic, as if saying, you should have remembered that I told you exactly this. Another example of using all the markers is in connective clauses, especially when using connective endings like 고 and 아서, 어서. A cultural touch point here. While I should be careful about generalizing, since diversity is becoming more important in Korea these days, it's still true that the Korean stream of consciousness tends to flow in chronological order. When you learn Korean grammar, did you ever learn that clauses connected by 고 or 아서, 어서 only mark the tense at the very end? All of these things are intertwined, so we can never fully understand the spectrum of this high context language by looking at just one part of the grammar. Ultimately, the Korean speaker's flow of thought is to say what happened first, then talk about what happened next. This logic is already visible in the grammar where subclauses are placed before the main clause. Marking the tense every single time is unnecessary here. In the end, you could say that Korean conversation tends to drift toward the main point after listing secondary details that the listener might not know yet. If you see Koreans learning English for the first time, you'll likely notice that they have a habit of putting if or when clauses at the beginning, just like the flow of Korean. Now, here's a realistic and everyday scenario. Let's say I can't go to a close friend's wedding. I think about 7 out of 10 times I'll say it like this. 미안해. 내가 갑자기 사정이 생겨서 결혼식 못 갈 것 같아. Of course, you could just say 나 갑자기 사정 생겨서 결혼식 못 갈 것 같아. If you say it like that, I mean, if you're really close, it's okay, but it feels a bit abrupt. It feels like you're being lazy with your speech. Even with your best friend, expecting your friend to magically understand everything you leave unsaid isn't a good conversation, even in Korean. It feels more like a one-sided expectation. I'd rather be polite and precise. Now, the second case where you must use case markers is when you want to highlight specific sentence components rather than the whole sentence. I explained this in detail in the second episode, so I'll skip it here because what comes next is really important. Alright, now I'm going to talk about when these markers are not acting as case markers. You can understand this as grammatically expressing nuance, similar to 은, 는, and in many cases, it's accompanied by a high-pitched accent. Give it a track to these sentences. 나는 멋진 선생님이야. 내가 멋진 선생님이야. Both have I as a subject, but the first one has 는 attached, and the second has 가. Naturally, they have different nuances, right? You can feel the nuance in both cases if you put strong emphasis on I in English. Even so, the emphasis in these two sentences feels clearly different to me. And this is a concept that's hard to explain even in Korean, but I'll give it a try. When you put stress on 나는, the grammatical role of 는 kicks in. As I mentioned previously, it is about the action or state. So it sounds like what I am is a wonderful teacher, or who I am is a wonderful teacher. Explaining the nuance of 내가 is a bit more complex. First of all, the most fundamental basic grammar role of a case marker in Korean is to express the exact relationship of entities to an action or state. So, a generic statement with a normal 는 added to the subject without an accent usually just provides information of general things about the subject, rather than covering every single case. Like in this sentence, 저는 매일 아침에 커피를 마셔요. This sentence grammatically indicates that drinking coffee every morning is a general pattern of me, not necessarily that I drink it every single day without fail. But this sentence, 제가 매일 커피를 마셔요, is a statement related to true or falsehood. The point of using all the case markers in a sentence like this is that it comes down to whether it's true or false. I mentioned exclusivity in an earlier episode, right? You know, a good conversation starts with shared things, but if you're on a blind date and you have no shared information and your date says this nonsense, 제가 매일 커피를 마셔요. Either this person lacks social skills or it was a build up for the next sentence, like, I haven't had any today, so can I buy you one? Or this person might be trying to hint at something with the sentence itself. To summarize, 내가 멋진 선생님이야 without any special accent is just a statement of truth or falsehood. But if you say it with an accent, 내가 멋진 선생님이야. It becomes I am a wonderful teacher, evoking an exclusive contrast. Other teachers are not wonderful teachers. Everything related to the meaning of case markers gather on exclusivity, the contrast between what is and what is not. The object marker works exactly the same way. 저는 매일 아침에 커피 마셔요. 저는 매일 아침에 커피를 마셔요. 저는 매일 아침에 커피는 마셔요. The first sentence, 저는 매일 아침에 커피 마셔요, doesn't highlight the coffee, so just stating one of my general habits without much special nuance. In the second, 저는 매일 아침에 커피를 마셔요. It depends on the situation, but if you stress 커피를, like 저는 매일 아침에 커피를 마셔요, and the listener hears that accent, the listener will judge the situation accordingly. For example, if I was the listener, I would think this way. It's morning, there's a cafe right there, and she emphasized that what she drinks is coffee. Is she asking me to buy a coffee? Now, let's try to read the mind of someone hearing the third sentence. 저는 매일 아침에 커피는 마셔요. I'll think this way. Okay, she's limited what she drinks every morning to coffee, and she didn't mention other things that she drinks in the morning, so it's definitely coffee that she drinks every morning. So, is she asking to buy a coffee? Now, let's look at an example of a double subject and double object construction. 나 한국어 할 수 있어. 나는 한국어 할 수 있어. 나는 한국어를 할 수 있어. Here, 수 is a dependent noun, which you probably learned as a grammar pattern. 을 수 있다 or 을 수 없다, I guess. This 수 acts as the second subject. The first sentence, 나 한국어 할 수 있어, is the most suitable translation for I can speak Korean in daily life. The second, 나는 한국어 할 수 있어, sounds like it was said after someone or some people in a group chat said they couldn't speak Korean. Finally, the third sentence, 나는 한국어를 할 수 있어, is rarely used unless there's some benefit to say the whole thing out loud. 두통 때문에 잠잘 수 없어. 두통 때문에 잠잘 수가 없어. 두통 때문에 잠을 잘 수가 없어. To be honest, I rarely say it the first way. The second and third are the most common. Personally, I prefer the third because emphasizing 없다, emphasizing negation, has a massive emphatic effect. Another reason is that when you can't do something, people often add all the markers to this overlapping structure to further emphasize the negation. Now, let's look at cases where these markers are attached to other sentence components. You'll recognize these. 요즘 사람들은 애 안 낳아요. 요즘 사람들은 애를 안 낳아요. 요즘 사람들은 애를 낳지 않아요. 요즘 사람들은 애를 낳지를 않아요. There are more variations, but I picked out the ones you're probably curious about. First, 요즘 사람들은 애 안 낳아요. This is just my style when I talk. If the other person also knows that people these days aren't having kids, there's no need to grammatically structure the sentence precisely. Second, 요즘 사람들은 애를 안 낳아요. It feels like a bit like you're worried about people not having kids. And depending on the context, it could be an intro to suggest a policy to boost the birth rate. Third, 요즘 사람들은 애를 낳지 않아요. This is, well, maybe it's because it's a negative sentence, but I prefer the fourth one. 요즘 사람들은 애를 낳지를 않아요. Or 요즘 사람들은 애를 낳지를 않아요. Even if the listener already knows that young people today aren't having kids, I might use the longer negation sentence to add more emphasis to the gloomy situation rather than a short sentence to express my worry more dramatically. So today, that's it. 아, 여기까지. 목이 다 쉬었어요.